Please join me in the responsive reading. Where the Spirit is, there people grow.
Lives develop, love thrives.
Where the Spirit is,
there are meetings and beginnings.
Where the Spirit is,
there is the Word, not only words.
Welcome. I am Wynn Irwin. I'm a fourth-generation Fountain Street person. Started with my great-grandparents and uncles and aunts, and came down to my grandparents, and then my mother and my father as well. And I came here sporadically, shall we say, as a child. But my mother was in the Schweitzer's Guild, and she was actually the first president, and she was very proud of that. And my dad, I know, served as treasurer also of the Fountain Street Church, so they were very, very involved. I am currently the chair of the Fountain Street Foundation Board. The purpose of the Fountain Street Foundation, and we have between $3 million and $3.5 million, is to preserve this beautiful facility that we have. And we made an agreement with the governing board years ago that that was our responsibility to fund, to keeping this institution what it is today. You can become a member of the Liberal Legacy Society, which I encourage all people to do. The minimum contribution is $100, or you can put in your estate plan or your planning documents a commitment, and that will also make you a member. We have a celebration coming up of those people who have already made that commitment, and anyone who's interested in it, and it's open to all. It'll be in the social hall on June 15th, and I put a few flyers out on the reception table outside, so you're all welcome to join us then. All of you here are dedicated to a journey, and all of our journeys hopefully are to free the mind, grow the soul, and to change the world. And with that in mind for all of us, I welcome everyone to Fountain Street Church.
To
just to assure a couple of very young men I see in the seats right there, I'm not going to be too boring. Okay? I see you, I'm listening, I'm aware. You can report back on how bad I was. I'll be looking for a little feedback when I'm done. I want to start off with some stuff that are readings, passages. I generally like to pick a sacred passage, this time from what is called Parasha Emor, a section from Ezekiel. This is out of the Jewish sequence of scriptures, which isn't the same as the Christian sequence. Ezekiel is a great prophet, himself a priest in the temple, and he was a kind of a purifier of the system that had gone corrupt. And so he's giving instruction, and he writes, or the prophet says, "And they shall teach my people the difference between the holy and the common, and cause them to discern between the unclean and the clean. And in a controversy they shall stand to judge," meaning the priests. "According to my ordinances they shall judge, and they shall keep my laws and my statutes in all my appointed seasons, and they shall hallow my Sabbaths." Ezekiel is trying to tell the priestly community that they have to show up and do their job correctly. No more sloughing it off, no more fudging the edges. You better play by the rules. Kind of like we say to basketball refs and umpires when they go the wrong way on a play we like very much. But he had a point. It's always easy to drift from the best into the convenient. I'll come back to this in an oblique way later, but I wanted you to have a little piece of Bible to chew on like gristle for the rest of the week. Good to chew. Haruki Murakami, a great author working in English, in one of his books has this striking and disturbing passage. Luckily, it isn't too explicit. He writes, "I wasn't in love with her, and she didn't love me, for the question of love was irrelevant. What I sought was a sense of being tossed about by some raging, savage force in the midst of which lay something absolutely crucial. I had no idea what that was." Blaise Pascal, the great French writer, in his Pensées, his thoughts, observed that lust is the source of all our actions and our humanity. Didn't see that one coming, did you? And the great Greek poet Sappho, writing of her love, "The touched heart madly stirs. Your laughter is like water hurrying over pebbles. Every gesture is a proclamation. Every sound is speech." Whew. This week, a grand jury concluded and found no felony crime was committed in the case of Sandra Bland. Bland was found dead in her jail cell in Waller County, Texas on July 13th, 2015, after she was arrested for a traffic violation. You may have seen the news. Authorities then said her death was a suicide. They've reinforced that notion. What you don't know is that Bland was not the only woman in police custody, woman of color, to die in police custody that month. There were at least two others. 2 weeks after Bland's death, Valkina Jones, 37, was found unresponsive in her jail cell in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. She'd been arrested after her ex-boyfriend accused her of assaulting him. Once in custody, she described her medical conditions and necessary medications in detail to officers, expressing concern for her well-being. Jones was found dead 15 hours later. Her death was ruled accidental and related to her medical conditions. Her story, in turn, sounds like Raynette Turner, who died in a cell in New York the next day after complaining about health problems. Our friends at Black Lives Matter reminds us that today and last week, we are lifting up the experience, the struggle, and the loss of black women under the designation Say Her Name. Sandra Bland, Valkina Jones, and Raynette Turner. Names that must be heard because Black Lives Matter. So I was playing second trombone I like playing second trombone. It means I didn't have any solos. Therefore, my mistakes would be less heard. I was in 11th grade, and I was in the pit band for our high school musical. Up there on the stage, my classmate Linda was singing the lead, and somewhere in the crowd of ladies in waiting was a tall, dark-haired girl named Wendy, then attached to a blonde Episcopalian dressed in knightly-looking tights and carrying a fake lance. The show was Camelot, and like many things from youth, the memories of those days are very strong. The songs still come easily to mind, the 7 deadly virtues. What would the simple folk do? And of course, the source of my title today, the lusty month of May. It is, in fact, May this month, and I, in fact, was in England in May in 2001, and it was glorious. The weather was warm and sunny most of the time. I quoted Shakespeare last week, and because it's the 400th anniversary of his death, another quotation seems apropos. This is from Richard II, when John of Gaunt says of the land, "This royal throne of kings, this sceptered isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden, demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection in the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house against the envy of less happier lands, this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this England." Makes you want to go, doesn't it? And so I felt that May, a kind of physical joy, wherein the eye and nose and ear were thrilled every day with something new, even if it could be centuries old. Is there a taste more lovely than port and Stilton, or a sight more stirring than the white cliffs of Dover? My senses were besotted with pleasure, and I lustily imbibed them all. When people speak of lust, they almost always mean the carnal form, you know. But it is so much more, and in the more is a lesson in spirituality that we too often forget. The silly song of Camelot, the lusty month of May, touches upon this larger sense of lust. Yes, it is about sex in all of its lovely ways, but it's also about appetite in general, the quenching of appetites, the feeling of pleasure being alive in the world. Last weekend, our symphony, a wonderful orchestra, I should say, closed its season with yet another rousing performance of Carmina Burana, poems written by German monks and friars who indeed had appetites and quenched them with love and drink and the thrill of being alive. Of course, a little part of me had to stifle a chuckle knowing I was surrounded by more than a few starchy Calvinists for whom the doing of such things would be considered quite the sin, but the hearing about them was considered quite artistic. Of course, I was there too, listening piously and inwardly celebrating. Our cousin creatures, the mere animals, the thoughtless ones, of course, they're much more at home in their skins than we are. Mary Oliver, in her beautiful poem, Wild Geese, reminds us of what we lose when we give up our animal parts. She writes, "You don't have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves." Is that not a phenomenal phrase? The soft animal of your body, love what it loves. I think that's perhaps the least Calvinist thing one could think. But denying pleasure and desire is not a copyrighted feature of Christianity. Lots of traditions have their austere and severe ways. So I'm really not poking fun at one community, just illustrating that it exists. But if we were made in the divine image, and it says right there, and all that God made was good, then is not this body, these appetites, these pleasures also good? Take the good, said the immigrant father to the young granddaughter. The woman she grew up to told me this story years ago. She was sitting at a kitchen table, a bowl of apples was there, and in the bowl of apples there were apples that had bruised spots and a couple that didn't, and grandfather said, "Take the good. You'll get plenty of bruised without being asked." True. If you do not take the good, the pleasurable good, the good of pleasure when it's available, because somehow you think you'll get it later, you may be mistaken. Or if you think somehow enjoying it is somehow wrong, take the good, said the ancestor. We need a healthier sense of lust, broader than the more narrow sexual ones. I think the Germans are better at this than we who have English in our background, or for that matter, Dutch. Remember, they're the monks that wrote the dirty poems that we just heard sung last time. Even the great Martin Luther, no friend of sin, in fact said at some point, "The Lord loveth a lusty sinner." Someone who enjoys being bad, because if you're going to be bad, don't do it in a small, half-hearted way. Who cannot love someone who loves their appetites? That put me in mind of a chorus. I'm a musician, or failed musician, as I like to put it, which means I envy the skills of Gene and the choir and Marilyn. But in Beethoven's wonderful and only opera Fidelio, a very earnest piece, there is a chorus of male prisoners who are led out to see the sunlight and drink the air after being confined in dungeons for days at a time. And as they come out, they sing in German, "O welche Lust," Lust, which means joy. Oh, what joy! So your lust is also your joy, your happiness, the sheer exuberance of being alive. Our bodies and appetites and pleasures can raise our spirits, not just lower them. I think perhaps we've lost the knowledge of how our bodies can do this, how our appetites and pleasures connect us to the sacred, not just to the profane. Of course, we can thank Mr. Paul for that. He was a very bright fellow who struggled with the sins of the flesh, as we all know. He talked about the thorn in his flesh that a messenger of Satan sent to buffet me. He spent a lot of time telling us how the flesh would enclose and imprison us when we should be allowing our spirit to run free toward God. He was very well versed in Greek thought as well as Jewish law, and he articulated this battle between the flesh and the spirit. Of course, like I said, there are other austere traditions. He's not the only one. But it is Christian Puritanism we hear most often in this country, an attitude which H.L. Mencken once defined as the haunting fear that someone somewhere may be happy. And it has an honest basis. From Aesop's fable about the ant and the grasshopper to Jay Gatsby's dissolute friends drinking themselves to oblivion, there is a sense, and a real one, that to live for the momentary pleasure is a waste of life. People call it the hedonistic treadmill. I like chocolate today, but it didn't taste quite so much. I'll have 2 instead, and then 3. And then suddenly you're eating it, and it doesn't feel as good anymore. To live for pleasure is not to have much of a life, and you're stuck in 2 places. You either become like Peggy Lee and start singing, "Is that all there is?" Or at worst, we end up like the Marquis de Sade in a dungeon where power and pleasure become excuses in themselves. But I just wanted to be sure you understood, I understood the complexity of that. Let's get back to the body. Let's get back to its spiritual reality, not just its physical reality, that they are means to wisdom, and that they are ways to faith, not just distractions and temptations. Some examples. A colleague who recently died once told me how on a Zen retreat, of which there could be no more austere experience, by the way, when they had meditated all day in silence after having nothing but tea in the morning, he sat down to eat, and he had a single piece of toast, and he remembered it as having a taste and a texture he had never noticed before. It was a revelation of experience. A single piece of toast, which some of you just pushed into your mouth on your way to church this morning. It isn't the privation, it's that he was attuned and attentive to the reality that our sense of taste is itself a doorway through which we can engage the world. But most of us just use it to get the calories where we want them. Walking along a street in Detroit many years ago, when my parents lived there for a few years, it was a summer day and I was lonesome, and I passed a house with a magnolia tree. The magnolia tree was in bloom, and the scent, the aroma, suddenly transported me back to where I was a boy at the age of 9 when we had a magnolia tree. Have you ever had that moment when an aroma transported you back through time, and you not just remembered, you felt, you sensed you could be the person you were? That's what aromas can do. Think about the churches that use incense, the way they transport us out of the ordinary into the extraordinary. Through the nose, it is through the body that we translate and transcend the moment. My eldest son turned 32 last week, which evoked, of course, memories of his birth, very vivid for us. In the last weeks of that pregnancy, my wife had all those backaches and all the soreness of late-stage pregnancy. It was hard, and any woman who's been there in the 8th or 9th month knows that you are carrying an immense weight. So sometimes she would ask me, literally, to stand behind her now and then and ask me, and I've told you this before, I really need to demonstrate this. Let me come down out of the pulpit. Not with a person. I'm not going to be. So imagine my pregnant wife is here, and she'd say, can you wrap your arms around me underneath a little bit, lace your fingers, and then lean back just a little bit. Take the weight off of the pelvis. And she would sigh, and her head would rest right here against my neck, and the baby would kick. And I tell you this because I don't think I've ever been physically closer as a family as I was in that moment. When the baby inside her, connected to her, was being felt by me, and I was holding them both in my arms, and the sensation of touch became holy, sacred, life-filled in a way that I will not be able to forget. The body is sacred. It teaches us sacred things. In Ignazio Saloni's book, Bread and Wine, written after the war, he tells of a family whose son was killed by the fascists, and he gathers the village at his home to honor his son. And he puts out a table full of bread and wine. And before they eat, he holds up the bread and he says, see this bread? He grew the wheat. He threshed and ground it. You eat him when you eat this bread. See this wine? He grew these grapes. 9 months it takes to grow the grapes, the length of a pregnancy. And he crushed them and bottle them. When you drink his blood. Yes, it was obviously a communion, but a communion of the body, of the elements of the earth that were created by the physical labor of a human being, in which we now partake. We, in our austere ways here in our cerebral liberal church, forget that the bread and the wine are real things. And when we do it with complete conviction, we are nourished in body and in mind. What have we lost? What have we lost? To be truly honest, And I promised in these latter years of my tenure to be as honest as I can without making you wish I had not. The simple purpose of any religion, take away all the gloss, is to keep body and soul together. That's it. Get through the week. Get through the day. Get through the year. Get enough hope, get enough faith that you don't perish and cash it in, whatever it is. Religion is here to keep body and soul together, but too often we talk about the soul and not about the body. As though the body were, I think we drag along after our spirit that has nothing to offer except a means to keeping us from going from here to there. The body is sacred. It is holy. It is powerful. It is good. It is righteous. We need a religion that's brave enough to embrace the body as well as the soul, flesh and spirit, brave enough to say that both are real and both are good. That is what an honest religion should do, or at least try to do, because there is wisdom in the body. There's wisdom about good and evil. We've all known about temptations of the body, haven't we? Pleasure tells us that life is real and good, but it also tells us that hunger and pain and poverty are real and evil. Justice is no abstraction to be written about. It's about feeding, healing, and protecting the bodies that have been deprived, hurt, imprisoned, and afflicted. Justice is about the healing of human bodies that have suffered through human hands. Black Lives Matter is about actual bodies and actual people who suffered actual pains and lived in actual sorrow. LGBTQ justice is about actual bodies so that we're not afraid of who's sitting next to us in the bathroom because it's just another soul trying to hold body and soul together. That's the sacredness of the body, that we should treat it with the dignity and respect that God gave it by calling it the likeness and image thereof. And those who claim a faith for this life have to revere the flesh as much as the soul. Revere it, not just protect it. Acknowledge its holy pleasures and its unholy sufferings. A religion for this world knows what Haruki Murakami knew, that something absolutely crucial is at stake in our bodies, with the power to create or destroy with our own hands, a power that can sanctify or defile with our own hands, that can hold body and soul together or tear them apart. Religion can make it holy or it can make it profane. And a religion for this world places its hope in something. What else is it? It is communion of flesh and spirit, that thing we call love. Which brings me back to Sappho. Remember those beautiful lines? She speaks of her love as the touched heart madly stirs. Your laughter is water hurrying over pebbles. Every gesture is a proclamation. Every sound is speech. You know exactly what that feeling is like, as if you've been in love. That's the sensation, isn't it? Our faith should dare to believe that the love we have each felt for a person, the communion of body and soul, can be the way we all live together as a people. We dare to imagine a world where every body stirs somebody's heart madly, where every laugh is like the ringing of bells, where every gesture feels like a dance, and every word arrives like a song, and every meal is a sacrament, be it nothing but a loaf of bread and a jug of wine. Yeah, that's preposterous. That'll never happen. I prefer to think I'm going to go to heaven. Think about that. Think about that. Should we not try to let our bodies remind us that every act of love is a commitment to the hope that we can be those people. Listen to the soft animal of your body. Take the good. Cherish your lust. The future depends on it. May the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart, and the feelings in my limbs be acceptable in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. Amen.